Lena Matthews had always lived a life of careful routine. Every morning, she woke up before sunrise, prepared her simple breakfast, and drove the same quiet route to Crestview Correctional Facility. The prison, surrounded by tall fences and guarded towers, was a place most people feared. But for Lena, it became her second home. She had been working there for nearly 4 years as a nurse, providing medical care to inmates who rarely received kindness from anyone. She kept her distance, focused on her work, and followed the rules. At least that's how it appeared to everyone around her. On the outside, Lena seemed like the perfect employee. She clocked in on time, never called in sick, and finished her tasks without complaints. Her colleagues barely noticed her. She wasn't someone who laughed loudly or joined lunchroom conversations. After a painful divorce that left her emotionally drained and isolated, she had built thick walls around herself. Her life became small, limited to her job and the silent drive back to her empty apartment. Slowly, the lines between her work and her personal life began to blur. It was during one of her routine shifts, when she first crossed paths with Damon Cross. Damon had a reputation inside the prison. He was serving a 20-year sentence for armed robbery and assault, known for being unpredictable and dangerous. But he was also clever, and he knew how to read people. Damon arrived at the medical wing one day with a deep cut on his arm, claiming it was an accident. Lena treated him quietly, wrapping the wound while barely making eye contact. Damon noticed her silence, her soft movements, and something about her sparked his interest. Their encounters began to multiply. Damon found excuses to visit the infirmary. Headaches, stomach pain, minor injuries that always seemed to happen when Lena was on duty. Over time, she started to notice his subtle attempts to get closer. He would offer polite thanks, leave small folded notes on her medical cart, and slowly chip away at her guarded exterior. Lena should have reported the inappropriate attention immediately, but she didn't. Something about Damon's presence made her feel seen, as if she mattered to someone for the first time in years. The secret exchange of notes turned into longer, hidden conversations during her shifts. Damon carefully constructed a story of his life, a life filled with regrets and a desire for redemption. Lena, starved for emotional connection, began to believe him. She convinced herself that Damon was different with her, that she could help him change. What started as professional concern quietly evolved into emotional dependency. She began to anticipate his visits, dressing more carefully on days she knew he would appear. Lena's small, controlled life suddenly felt thrilling, filled with secret meanings and forbidden excitement. She started bringing Damon little items she knew he missed from the outside world. A packet of gum, an extra granola bar, a book with worn edges. Each time, Damon thanked her with those calm, steady eyes that seemed to understand her loneliness. Slowly, he tested the limits, asking for things he wasn't allowed to have. Lena hesitated, but Damon always had a way of making his requests seem harmless, even necessary. The more she gave, the more trapped she became. She knew the rules, but she ignored them, telling herself that their connection was real. Damon's charm clouded her judgment, and she began to take risks that would have shocked her former self. She stopped noticing the cameras. She stopped caring about what would happen if she got caught. The prison walls that once symbolized her duty now held the secret to her new, dangerous life. And as her heart pulled her deeper, she had no idea that this path would soon lead to betrayal, violence, and a murder that would shatter everything. Lena's connection with Damon deepened in ways she could no longer control. What began as small gestures soon turned into acts of serious misconduct. She started to bring him items that were strictly forbidden, like a small phone carefully hidden inside medical supplies. Damon convinced her that it was only for talking to his family, that he needed to feel connected to the outside world too. Stay sane, Lena believed him. She wanted to believe him. Every step she took further blurred the lines between right and wrong, but she told herself it was out of love. Damon used that phone for far more than family calls. He was quietly rebuilding his influence inside the prison walls. With Lena providing him with information about guard schedules, surveillance gaps, and daily routines, Damon gained the power to control more than just his own life. He passed messages to other inmates, arranged trades, and strengthened his position among dangerous prison groups. Damon's debts were erased, his enemies silenced, and soon he became one of the most respected and feared men in Crestview. Lena remained completely unaware of how deeply Damon had manipulated her. She thought she was his only trusted friend, the person who kept him grounded. The excitement of their secret relationship overwhelmed her judgment. Every time she walked through the medical wing, she looked forward to their stolen moments. The prison, which once felt cold and lifeless, now seemed alive with purpose, a secret world that only she and Damon understood. Outside the prison, Lena's life became even smaller. She cut ties with her family, ignored calls from old friends, and rarely left her apartment except to go to work. Damon became her entire world. She lived for the next note, the next brief meeting, the next whispered promise of a future beyond the prison walls. In her mind, they would one day leave everything behind and start over somewhere far away. She clung to this dream, even as the risks piled up around her. Her coworkers noticed the subtle changes. Medications occasionally went missing from the inventory. Files weren't always where they should be. Some guards suspected that Lena was distracted, maybe even involved in something more serious, but there was never enough proof to confront her. The prison's routines made it easy for small things to be overlooked, and Damon was careful to never push too hard all at once. But Damon's requests grew riskier. He asked Lena to bring in a small blade, hidden inside a hollowed-out book. At first, Lena refused, terrified by what could happen. Damon reassured her, insisting it was only for protection, that prison life was dangerous, and that he couldn't survive without it. He told her he needed to stay alive so they could eventually be together. Reluctantly, she gave in. She was too far in to stop now, too emotionally invested to walk away. What Lena didn't know was that Damon had been planning something far more dangerous than simple survival. He wasn't just protecting himself. He was preparing for something big. Behind Lena's back, Damon was carefully building an escape plan, one that required every piece of information she had unknowingly provided. She had given him everything. He needed access to restricted areas, knowledge of guard rotations, and now, a weapon. Lena continued to believe in their shared future. She convinced herself that Damon would never harm her, that they were partners in this secret world. But Damon saw her as a useful tool, someone he could manipulate to achieve his freedom. Every kind word, every promise was calculated to keep her under his control. Lena was trapped in a web of lies, completely unaware of the deadly storm that was about to unfold. By the time the sun rose, the prison was in complete disarray. Sirens echoed through the halls, doors slammed shut, and Guards scrambled to lock down every section of the facility. The murder of an inmate overnight had shattered the fragile order of Crestview Correctional Facility. The victim, found in a rarely monitored maintenance hallway, had been brutally stabbed. The violence of the attack was unmistakable, and the weapon used matched the description of the small blade that Lena had smuggled into the prison weeks earlier. The investigation launched immediately. Guards began a frantic headcount, and within minutes, they realized that Damon Cross was missing. His cell was empty. Panic spread quickly as prison officials confirmed that Damon had vanished during the night. As they searched for any signs of his escape, it became clear that someone from the outside had helped him. Security footage showed brief moments where Lena's usual movements appeared suspicious. Her car was no longer in the staff parking lot. She had vanished too. Lena had driven Damon away from the prison under the cover of darkness. They had agreed to meet at a back service gate where security was weakest. Lena believed they would hide together in an abandoned warehouse on the edge of town before making their way to a distant city where no one would find them. She had packed supplies, brought extra cash, and carried a map with routes carefully planned. She was nervous but also excited. She believed she had risked everything for love. But the dream unraveled quickly. Damon grew distant as soon as they were outside the prison walls. His warm reassurances faded, replaced by cold instructions. He took control of the escape without consulting her, and Lena's confusion grew. She had imagined them starting over, building a life together. Instead, Damon seemed impatient, eager to move on without her. It didn't take long for him to show his true intentions. After a few hours of hiding, Damon abruptly left the warehouse, taking Lena's car, her identification, and all the money she had brought. He left her stranded without resources, without a plan, and without any way to contact him. Lena sat alone in the dusty, abandoned building, realizing she had been nothing more than a stepping stone in Damon's carefully crafted escape. The weight of the betrayal crushed her. She had sacrificed her job, her freedom, and her entire life for a man who discarded her the moment she was no longer useful. Panic consumed her. She tried to reach out to Damon using the hidden phone, but he never answered. In desperation, she called her sister, sobbing and incoherent. Her sister, horrified by the situation, immediately contacted the police and provided Lena's location. When law enforcement arrived at the warehouse, they found Lena trembling, exhausted, and emotionally shattered. She did not resist arrest. The evidence was overwhelming. Investigators quickly pieced together the trail of her involvement: the missing medications, the smuggled contraband, the security breaches, and the final escape. Lena confessed to everything, unable to process the depth of her mistake. Meanwhile, the search for Damon stretched across multiple states. His murder of the inmate inside the prison had become national news, and the story of a prison nurse aiding in his escape captured public attention. Lena's name was everywhere, her quiet life now exposed to the world. She became known not as a caregiver, but as a woman who had been manipulated, who had risked it all for a fantasy that never existed. As Lena sat alone in her jail cell, she began to understand the full scope of her downfall. Damon had vanished, leaving chaos behind, and all she had left was the crushing realization that she had destroyed her life for a man who never truly cared. Lena's trial became a media sensation. News outlets flooded the courthouse, eager to cover the story of the prison nurse who had fallen for a dangerous inmate and helped him escape. Reporters painted her as both a victim and a criminal, a woman who had been manipulated, yet willingly crossed every line. The court saw it differently. Lina was found guilty of aiding a prison escape, smuggling contraband, and obstructing justice. She was sentenced to several years in prison, a bitter irony that forced her to live behind the same kind of walls where she once worked. As Lina began serving her sentence, she was met with cold stares and quiet whispers from fellow inmates who had heard her story. Some mocked her for being foolish, others treated her with suspicion. Inside those walls, respect was hard to earn, and Lina had none. She became another prisoner in the system, her former role as a nurse offering her no protection. She spent her days replaying every decision, haunted by the realization that she had allowed herself to be used. The memories of Damon, once thrilling, now burned with betrayal. Outside the prison, law enforcement continued the search for Damon Cross. His face appeared on wanted posters, news bulletins, and highway signs across multiple states. Weeks passed, with no sightings. He seemed to have disappeared without a trace. Investigators followed every possible lead, chasing tips that led nowhere. Damon had been careful. He had planned his escape with precision, using the resources Lina had provided. To vanish into the shadows, months later, a breakthrough came unexpectedly. A hiker in a remote wooded area stumbled upon human remains, partially hidden under a collapsed structure. Nearby, they found Lina's stolen car, abandoned and covered in dirt and leaves. The remains were later confirmed to be Damon's. He had been dead for weeks, possibly longer. The cause of death was violent. His injuries suggested he had been attacked and left to die in isolation. Investigators slowly pieced together what had likely happened. After leaving Lina at the warehouse, Damon had contacted criminal associates he once trusted. He had expected help, but instead, they had seen him as a threat and a risk. He was no longer useful to them. They had likely lured him into the woods, taken the resources he carried, and left him to die. The man who had manipulated, betrayed, and used Lina had been betrayed himself in the end. News of Damon's death reached Lina while she was still behind bars. The weight of the information crushed her. She had risked everything for him, only to learn that he had discarded her and then been discarded himself. The man who once promised her freedom had met a lonely, brutal end. There would be no second chance, no reunion, no answers. His death closed the final chapter of their twisted story, but it left Lina with nothing but regret. Her case slowly faded from public attention, replaced by new headlines and fresh scandals. But for Lina, the story never ended. Each day in prison was a reminder of what she had lost and what she had become. She was no longer the quiet nurse who kept her head down. She was now known for her fall, her weakness, her betrayal of her own life. The affair that had once seemed like an escape from loneliness had turned into a nightmare that consumed everything. In the end, the secret relationship cost Lina her career, her freedom, and her future. Damon's manipulation led to his own death, and Lina was left to live in the ruins of the life she had destroyed with her own hands.